depend a lot on what industry you're in. Certain industries like banking, finance, engineering, insurance, those are very specialized in their skills and requires a great deal of understanding. One of our clients does geological software for the oil industry. They will only hire people that have oil exploration-related degrees, like petrophysicists, geologists, and so forth, because they say, we can teach people everything else they need to know, but the oil business, no, that takes 4 years in college to learn that. So you need to understand what depth of knowledge is required there, and of course, understanding of testing skills. And all of those do vary from one organization to another. There needs to be some way of assessing and managing levels of skills, whether that's a quarterly process or it's part of the annual performance review or what have you, but there needs to be some way by which the set of skills is managed and optimized. Again, keeping in mind that that's a moving target, that the set of skills that you need in your organization will evolve. The technology tends to evolve quickly, but so do other aspects, testing and the application as well. So that has to be managed to keep the right team in place. And this issue of the skills assessment and possibly management, this is something that you need to think about both for in-house and for outsourced teams. And this is a mistake that we've seen a number of our clients that are using outsourcing make, is they assume, oh, well, we've handed that problem off, right? We've hired this outsourced team to do our testing or our development and our testing. All the skills problems just magically became their problem. Well, no. If a vendor is not competent to do the job that you've hired the vendor for, in the long run, whose problem is that? Right? It's not just the vendor's problem. I mean, it's partly the vendor's problem because eventually you assume that they'll be found out and the vendor will be let go. But how much damage will they have done in the meantime, right? How big a mess will they have created that you have to clean up? So if you're going to use an outsourced team, you have to think about how you're going to assure the skills. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Excuse me. So assuming that you've got the skills identified, these are the skills that we would need to have in our organization, then you can assess the team against this sort of this idealized standard that you've come up with. The perfect test team would look like this. Okay, so where do we stand? Identify the weaknesses in your team, and identify the strengths as well, of course. Now, to fill the weaknesses, what can we do? Well, one thing that we can do is we can look at the existing people and say, okay, well, here's where they're weak, and you can use training. You can use cross-training. Where I've got strong people, I've got weak people, I'm going to buddy up the strong person with the weak person, have to teach them how to do this, right? So there are a lot of ways to try to cross-pollinate within your team and get shared skills. Now, suppose you're weak across your whole team in a particular area. There's something that you decide, we need to know this, and nobody knows it. Then you could add new people to bring in those skills as well. I mean, it's all well and good to go out and get your existing staff trained, but that's really only a starting point, right? Because you don't actually have a skill in any meaningful way until you've applied it to solve a real-world problem. Do you agree with that? That's sort of a necessity. A theoretical thing that you know is one thing. The ability to use it to do something in a testing project is something different. So I think even if you're going to use training, you still have to figure out, well, how am I going to make sure that that can be practically applied? And it can be very helpful if you can bring in somebody who's got those skills as well to serve as a mentor as the new skills are being rolled out. Now, another option is to identify a testing service provider who can fill the gaps. And this can make a lot of sense if either your particular skill is a transient one. In other words, you need it for a very limited period of time on a particular project, but not forever, right? Like, for example, compatibility testing. If you've got a browser-based application and you want to make sure that that browser-based application is compatible across a wide range of operating systems and browsers and security software and so forth, you can try to build that skill within your own organization, or you could just say, you know what, there are test labs out there that not only have the equipment to do that, but they have people that know how to do that. Why not just hand that whole problem off to them, right? So that could be a good option for dealing with skills where the need is significant, but the need is very transient, and there really wouldn't be a payback to trying to develop that skill or the capital equipment in-house. That's going to lead to a need to be very careful in your selection of these outsourced vendors, because if you're hiring a vendor based on a specific skill area, of course you need to be able to look at, do they actually have that skill, right? And we see sometimes clients go, well, we're going to look at price per hour. But that's not what you're paying for. In this particular case, you're not buying an hour of testing done, right? You're buying a collection of configurations where those have been tested against your application. Can they actually do that? Okay, so that brings us to another consideration, which I think is important to keep in mind with respect to any sort of distributed testing. Now, this applies whether you're going to use an outsourced testing service provider, or if you're going to develop, say, an offshore testing center of excellence or something, which is this issue of the skills triangle. Let me try to scribble on this a little bit here. So let's say that this is 45 years here at the top. Okay. Now, if you're in a fully developed economy, like the United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, you can find people that have been in the software engineering business, possibly even within your particular niche, whatever that is, banking or engineering or what have you, for 45 years. There are people out there who have been doing it that long, and they're still practicing. There aren't a lot of them, but they're out there. So that's the top of this pyramid up here. Okay? There are not a lot, but they're there. And as we move down, let's say to the 20 years or so of experience, like at the halfway point, we got a lot of people who are really seasoned professionals in software engineering and testing and so forth who are available. They're in the industry. Available to not only work on projects, but also to do skills transfers to people on projects, right? Now, let's say that we go to a developing region, say Philippines or Vietnam or something like that, right, where they're just now getting into software engineering. That peak of the triangle might very well be down in, say, 10, maybe if you're lucky, 15 years. Maybe if you're not so lucky, maybe 5 years, right? So that creates a real problem because you don't have a lot of expertise floating around available to mentor and lead, right? So that's one of the issues that you have to keep in mind. Another issue is in these developing regions, what you see is that because the price differential in salaries is so large, you have this explosion in the number of people available that's happening. A lot of people are coming into the industry. But of course they're coming into the industry. So how many years experience do they have when they enter the industry? 0, right? Now that means that when you're thinking about how to measure the skills across multiple regions, you really have to think about this issue of objectivity. Because people tend to assess their own skills relative to their cohort, relative to their peers, the people that are immediately around them. It's a natural thing in any endeavor that you're in.